Jaya Radha Madhava Punya Vihari. Hare Krishna to everyone. We're again conducting another interview with a very inspiring devotee. In this case, this is Rasarani Prabhu. She's a disciple of Srila Prabhupada, and she lives in Australia. She was initiated, and also you can always correct me if I say something wrong. So I think it was 71, right, that you were initiated by Srila Prabhupada when he first came to Australia. And you did services in Australia, in Indonesia and India. You have 2 sons. So I'm also very confident that your life was full of various adventures in devotional life. But so before we start to speak about books are the basis and how Srila Prabhupada's books impacted your life, we would also like to know a little bit from you, if it's okay, that you tell us how you came to Krishna consciousness and what was inspiring for you that you came.
Well, because when I was young, I was always a seeker. I was looking for something different than my parents' life. And I was interested in all kinds of, mysticism and things from an early age. So I was sort of toying with Buddhism and meditation and, all those different kind of non-material sort of things, but not finding any answers. So to make a long story short, my parents, there was the bicentenary of Australia where the Captain Cook supposedly discovered Australia. And so we went for the 200 celebration in the park. And of course, the devotees were there, and we walked past the devotees, and I was just captivated by the sound. And, I felt like there was something special there. And so then my parents dragged me off, of course, but I could not forget that sound. There was something magnetic about that sound. And so it was very homely. And anyway, I didn't get to speak to anyone because I was with my parents. So then I discovered the devotees again in the street. So then I asked for a book, and, just one devotee spoke to me, and all the answers that I was looking for, he was explaining. And I thought, wow, this is fabulous. So he invited me to the temple, and it took probably about 6 months to get to the temple because my father wouldn't take me. He kept having golf games every Sunday when there was a feast. So I kept trying to talk, please take me to the temple. No, I have to go with you. You can't go alone. We have to see what it's like. So eventually, after about 6 months, I was 17 at the time. So I was in my last year of school. So they wanted to make sure, because I was quite sheltered. I lived a sheltered life, with strict parents. So then my father took me to the temple, strange enough. He eventually conceded and gave up one of his golf days and took me to the temple.
That's nice.
And that first experience was amazing. Just the smell coming outside of the temple, and the look of the temple was just so weird, but it was so wonderful. And then the chanting of the holy name, I was just, instantly attracted to it. I thought, oh gosh, I found my people. Even though I was really straight, very conservative, and these all look like hippies, and somehow they were kindred spirits. And so then I said, okay, now I want to go to the feast every Sunday. So is it okay because I have my license, can I drive in? And so they conceded that I could go to the feast. So I went every Sunday, and then they started to get suspicious. Why is she going every Sunday? So they tried to stop me, but I kept begging. They said, no, you can't go this Sunday. So anyway, so then I just went every Sunday, and then my mother said, oh, when I was 18, I left home. So I think that when you get to 18, you can leave home also if you want. And I thought, why is she saying that? Because she's so conservative. I wasn't even allowed out of the street practically. So I thought Krishna was in her heart. He was kind of giving me a way to, to join the temple, because I don't see how I could have done it otherwise. So I thought, Krishna's tricking her. So as soon as I turned 18, I joined the temple, and she was like shocked. So then 2 weeks later, Prabhupada came and I got initiated. So it was all very fast.
Wow.
That was when Prabhupada first came to Sydney in 1971 in May. And Prabhupada hadn't been to Australia before. So he brought Radha Gopinath, our first deities, and strange sets of japa beads for our initiation. They kind of brought them from India. And so that was basically how I came. But there was something from a past life for sure, because I was just, looking for it. And then it came, and then that was it. I just knew that this is what I had to do. And I think back, and it was just so unusual for me to be able to do that, because I was so straight and so conservative and so law-abiding and so, always did what my parents told me to do most of the time. And but somehow I would manage to join this radical temple and live in the temple and, ostracize my parents.
Yeah. And I liked how this part of the story where your mother told you that at 18 she also left. So that's quite amazing how she told you that.
I know. I can never understand why she would say that, because, anyway. But you might have seen that video. My mother's on the video, that one in Sydney. It's quite famous for
I was
my
looking,
mother's.
but I couldn't find it. You can tell us.
Yeah. Probably if you look up Srila Prabhupada in Sydney in 1971. I don't know. I've seen it a few times. It pops up, and I've got it somehow recorded. But it was quite surprising to see it, because I didn't know about it for about, till about 30 years later. And I saw it. It was actually gathered from the news agency, the ABC channel, by my ex-husband, actually, and he got it before they destroyed all that stuff. So, it's a very rare thing. And seeing it 30 years later and looking at my mother, and it was quite bizarre. Really.
What did your mother say on this video? Maybe I saw it. I do remember some video with a lady in Australia, but I'm not sure if that's the one. So
yeah, probably. I was in Mayapur one time, standing on the balcony waiting for the Rath cart to go by, and in Mayapur, and one devotee was standing next to me, some brahmachari, and he said, "Are you the one in the video?" I thought, wow, he recognized me like 50 years later.
okay.
You're the one in the video. Anyway, but my mother, she was quite strict. She was saying, oh, they don't allow them to have sex. And I thought, I brought my daughter up, and I thought she was happy, but she's always looking for something. And the interviewer was saying, well, what if your mother wanted you to go home? And I said, well, I can't go home, because Prabhupada's here, he's a pure devotee. And yeah, but it was quite impressive for someone only being in the temple for 2 weeks. I had a lot of philosophy. I learned a lot quickly.
Yeah, I think I remember it, that I saw that video. It's very nice. Yeah, and it's also amazing how you found out 30 years
Yes.
about it. Very nice.
Yeah.
And can you tell us, was it the books that attracted you to the most, or the sound of the kirtan, or generally devotees, or just you were mesmerized by Srila Prabhupada?
I think initially it was when I got the first Back to Godhead from the devotee. He had all the answers, and I was always wondering about God. What would God look like? And so it really can't look like us, because we're gross and imperfect. So, but then the devotee said, well, on the front of the cover was Krishna with all jewelry on. He said, why has he got jewelry on? I thought, why would God wear jewelry? And he said, well, God likes to wear jewelry, and that's why we wear jewelry, because, it's kind of like a reflection of what God does. And it kind of, all these little things just made sense, because I had asked priests in the past, and they couldn't, they didn't know what God looked like or anything about it. So, but this devotee was giving me all this information. And it was also the first time I went to the feast, the prasadam. It was so relishable and so strange, but so mystical, that I couldn't stop thinking about it for a week. I just thought, I have to get back to that temple to get more of that food, because there's something really strange about it, that I'm just so attracted to it. And also the sound, was pretty much all of it, even the smell of the incense, just coming in, because the smell of the incense and all the mantras, and an indication of the philosophy, the prasadam, and the holy name. And also because I had, then I think that George Harrison, that Hare Krishna tune was had just come out, just prior to that. And so, yeah, it was kind of, I was mesmerized by that sound vibration, because it was so different from my upbringing and, this boring, mundane stuff that my mother said, oh, yeah, you should get a boyfriend and all this. And I wasn't interested. And, I wasn't interested in drugs or any of that. I was just kind of, trying to astral travel. And I had a crystal ball. I was trying to, work out how to use a crystal ball and doing all these kind of things. I was kind of a weirdo.
Yeah.
But then, honestly, when I first read Bhagavad Gita, of course, they gave me a Bhagavad Gita early on. And I couldn't understand a word of it, to tell you the truth. I don't know what they're talking about. Yeah, so I know this interview is all about the books, right?
Yeah. We'll get
Oh, I thought, but a lot of devotees, they thought, wow, this Bhagavad Gita is so far out. I thought, I don't understand it. I understand what they're talking about. But I got more information from the devotees when I went to the feast, because they always would bail you up in a corner and start preaching to you, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
So I had my japa beads. I got japa beads about, I think, the second time I was there. They said, you have to chant the mantra 16 rounds. But I didn't know about japa, because they were all chanting, singing it. So I went home and I'm trying to sing each mantra, and it was taking so long, Hare Krishna, I thought, oh gosh, I'm never going to get 16 rounds done.
Yeah.
And then the next week, I saw them doing this funny mumbling in the corner, and I realized that's how you do japa. So then I was doing japa in the morning at my home. And then at 4 o'clock, I'd get up and start doing it. Then my mother heard me. She came in and said, stop doing that nonsense. So I had to do it really quietly under the bed covers, because the poor parents, they think you're going crazy, doing all these crazy things. But it was interesting that Krishna gave me all this determination to keep doing it. I'm always kind of impressed. I think, how did I do it? Because I'm not really a person who goes against, what other people are doing, kind of thing, Like, I'm usually very submissive, I suppose. Yeah. So anyway, somehow, my mother's crying at the door and I'm leaving to join the temple. My father drove me to the temple. Look what you're doing to your mother. But anyway, I knew I had to do it. So I just had to do it, because that was my calling. And at the time, we didn't have many books. There was mostly back to Godheads. And then the Bhagavatam, there was a few old copies of the one with the, that sort of jute covering. And those new ones weren't out then, because Prabhupada was still translating them. I think there was just the first volume, first canto was out at that time. So we didn't have the books ourselves. They were just one copy per temple, or our temple had one copy. So we would have class from that. But I was very interested in the philosophy. So I used to listen very carefully. I like to listen. I like to hear the philosophy. It's very calming and soothing. And I used to learn shlokas and, try to, study the books and try to understand how it, like how, for example, how the timeline of it all, and I had copious notes about different things, and I was kind of quite studious, I guess, in one sense, compared to probably other people at the time, because I knew 100 slokas very early on in the piece, and people thought that was kind of interesting. Of course, I can't remember them now because I'm old, but it's good to do everything when you're young, because you don't know what's going to happen. It's not very fun forgetting, because now I read things I think I used to know that. Now it's like some distant memory, and you have to just keep kind of reminding yourself all the time. It doesn't stay in the brain cells, but what to do, have to just accept it. The body, yeah.
I find it very interesting, and thank you for sharing. And before we start digging into Prabhupada's books, I just wanted to ask you, what was your impression when you met Srila Prabhupada, and what Srila Prabhupada meant for you, or your encounters, if you can share a little bit about that with us.
Well, I met Prabhupada first when he came to the airport in Australia, in Sydney, and it was quite an exciting meeting, for all of us devotees, because the day before, or in fact that morning before, the day before, they said, "Oh, Prabhupada's not coming now, change of plans." So we're all very disappointed, because we're all ready for Prabhupada to come, and we're all very excited to meet our guru. And then the telegram came and said it's coming, but in fact it was just a misunderstanding by the way it was worded. And then that morning we found out Prabhupada was actually coming, so we were all so excited, and it was like we were so let down, and then we were so overly excited because Prabhupada was actually coming, and we didn't know who Prabhupada was, or we'd never met him, or we just knew that he was someone special, and he was a pure devotee, and there was something special about a pure devotee, and he's going to save us from the whole material world, and he's going to take us back to Godhead, and we'll get initiated by him. And when we get initiated by him, we give our whole life to him. So it was a big thing. It was a sort of a super, super big thing to meet Prabhupada. And then when we went to the airport, I remember the temple president said, "Nobody scream, nobody scream." So, of course, Prabhupada came through the gates, and we were so hyped up that all the girls screamed. It's like a big pop star coming or something. And then we all, bowed down and blocked all the whole airport up with, Prabhupada's trying to walk through, and we're all bowed down. We didn't know the protocol very well, but Prabhupada's lotus feet were right in front of us, just trying to walk through. But as a lot of people mentioned, Prabhupada seemed such a giant before we met him, and then when you met him, he was quite short, of stature. He was sort of like a small Indian-bodied person. So we were like, wow. And he seemed to be glowing. People say that also, that, he had this glow and this vibrance and this kind of, he filled the whole airport. Basically, all eyes were on Prabhupada as we went through the airport. Yeah, so it was one of those experiences that you don't forget. And then, over the time when I met Prabhupada personally from time to time doing service in Indonesia and Bombay, when you're just alone with Prabhupada by accident, or all these things happen sometimes. Yes, it's kind of, Prabhupada will always seem to us to be like God, really, because he was like, this is God's representative. So Prabhupada's the same as God. So there was a lot of awe and reverence. As opposed to often now people are very familiar with their gurus, they've known them, and they can talk to them, they chat, they tell them their problems. But Prabhupada was more kind of distant from us, more removed, and more like a God kind of figure, I guess, in that sense, because he was so special, so rare, And we all heard those stories about, it's so rare to meet a pure devotee in this world. And so it's kind of it was something, he was like a super person. And then people saw Prabhupada would walk on sand and not leave footprints, and we heard about this. And so there were many things that were very special about Prabhupada, as opposed to, some other devotees, or, even today, the gurus, there's a lot of them now. And, the devotees are quite familiar with them, and they're very friendly. But Prabhupada was always kind of, he was always removed, he was always someone who was different from us. We would kind of grovel at his feet. Yeah.
And but now, because you said that, don't you think that your relationship, don't you think, I know you certainly have realizations, but from this first moments of meeting Prabhupada and becoming his disciple and performing devotional service until now, because now what is left is Vani, and Vani is in the book, did your relationship also go deeper, transform? How do you see it? And if you can say a little.
Yeah. Well, it's in the old days, the information was handed down by word of mouth, in other yugas. But now, it was heard and it was remembered, and people remembered everything. But now it's Kali Yuga, so we need the written books. So Prabhupada went to so much trouble to write these books. He was up all night long pretty much writing these books. He hardly slept. So it's kind of our duty to honour that endeavour that Prabhupada wrote. Recently we were in Chippiwater for the opening of the Chippiwater temple in Delhi. It's the little temple in Delhi where Prabhupada wrote a lot of his books, and he'd go back and forwards from Vrindavan to Chippiwater while he was printing. And so it's kind of an important place for where Prabhupada was translating, a time, and they, it just kind of brought home the importance of and the struggle that Prabhupada had to actually get these books translated and printed, and even in India when he was doing it, let alone all the books that he wrote after he came to the West. So now how else are we going to discover our real home, our real relatives, our real service in Goloka, our real eternal relationships, except through the Shastra, because this is the Shastra for the next 10,000 years, or for the, the rest of the golden age that's supposedly coming. So and I'm quite a little bit isolated, I guess, because I don't live in the temple. So, the books are my association, and, if people might not be able to be with devotees every single day, then how do you get your association? Through the books. And as soon as you pick up a book, there's, Rupa Goswami or Lord Chaitanya, or, stories about Radha and Krishna. So they're there in these books, and they're like our family. So we're making these connections through reading more and more about our real family.
So nice.
And also, the words have spiritual sound vibrations. So these are purifying and uplifting. And just by reading one word, sometimes new devotees, sometimes I've mentored devotees, and they said, I have to go to work, I don't have time to read anything. I said, well, just read one sentence of the Bhagavatam as you're going out the door. It just changes everything.
Yeah.
Just have to read one sentence. You don't have to read the whole book. Just read something, because that the vibration and the frequency, the spiritual sound is very purifying. And even if we don't know what it's doing, it's going into the heart, and, it's connecting with Krishna. And even having a book in the house that you don't even read, it's like sometimes we give it to non-devotees and they never read them, but they're in the house. And all these things are special that we might not really understand totally what's going on. We're just reading it. Oh, it's a book. We have to read it. It's our duty. Our guru told us to read, the book. So we're reading it. But we don't know that we're actually, solidifying our relationship with the Lord. Because Krishna is the best friend, right? So how do we know Krishna? How do we, discover Krishna? Well, you read about Krishna, you read about the different stories about Krishna, the way the different acharyas describe Krishna, their relationship with Krishna. So the whole point that I've realized is that one has to find your own personal relationship with Krishna and Radha and all the, Krishna's associates, basically. But, Krishna's the one in our heart. So we have to make friends with Krishna, basically.
Yeah.
And it's important to not keep Krishna at a distance. Krishna as very close to you, and not like I'm not purified enough, Krishna's not there, I have to wait 15 years before I can get purified enough to be friends with Krishna. But Krishna's kind of just waiting there for you to turn to him. And an easy way to do that is by reading Prabhupada's books, because it's just every single word, every single tiny little sentence is reminding you of your relationship with Krishna, even if it's not necessarily direct. Like at the moment, Ambika and I are doing Bhagavatam Buddy, and we're reading about the living entities going to hell.
Yeah, that's a heavy chemical. Yeah.
We're thinking, boy, this is really gross. We don't want to. We kind of feel sorry for all these people having to go to hell. And she was wondering, why they. They don't know it. These people that don't know anything, and yet they're still having to go to hell because they don't really know they're doing any wrong. And, so we have to think about things. And she said, well, we have to honor Kapila Dev because he wrote about it. So therefore, we're honoring it by reading it and analyzing it and thinking about it. So even little things like that. And so I'm finding myself, seeing people in a different light, more compassion, because I'm just thinking these people, they know nothing as I walk around the street, and they might be going to these hells that we're reading about right now, and we have this special privilege of understanding these things because Prabhupada wrote these books. Otherwise we'd be just like these people, just wandering around, heading for hell. So yeah, it's and it's interesting with reading Prabhupada's books that you read the books once, you read it twice, and every time you get more and more realizations. I think pretty much every devotee has realized that you feel like you've never read the book before, and there it is. More things that you've never seen before. So it's kind of that ever fresh nature of Prabhupada's books. And even just, the Sanskrit, just looking at the Sanskrit words and trying to, understand a few of them and see how they're, written, and just even things like that are interesting, just to look at the Sanskrit and learn a few Sanskrit words and just see how they're formed and the vibration of them, and how it's different from your own language. There's so many things in the books that you can find. And one interesting thing was when I was in Melbourne, I don't really know how it happened, but I got a letter from Prabhupada, and I don't know why he sent me a letter.
Okay.
Because it was just like kind of, he said, yes, please read and study my books very carefully, and in this way you go back to Godhead. And I thought, wonder why he said that. Why say that? Why not something else? I'm always mystified by this letter that Prabhupada wrote to me.
But you didn't write to him like something? He just...
No, I don't know what happened. I don't know why. I don't, I honestly don't know. It just sort of turned up. And
maybe
I thought, that's interesting. Yeah, so it's probably trying to tell me something. Why me? Well, what did I do? I didn't. It's just one of those random events that just happened. Maybe the temple president said something. I don't know where it came from. So I thought, oh well, that's good because I do like to read and study. And honestly, I don't do so much study now because I find it frustrating because I forget everything. And, I used to have notes and notes and so many notes. And I used to try to kind of work out, how everything fitted together and kind of put Krishna in a box. But I realized you can't put Krishna in a box. You can never really understand it. I always kind of thought, well, if I summarize it, because I went through the Bhagavad Gita and summarized every single verse into like one line, so I could go through and just kind of try to understand the Bhagavad Gita. And I realized that's not going to work. You can never understand Krishna that way. Then I got the Bhagavatam. I'm trying to work out the order of how the historical events happened. Well, that didn't work either because things back and forwards all over the place. I'm thinking this is not what my mind's used to. I like a nice flow of, beginning to end. So I realized, we can never actually capture Krishna. He'll always be kind of just a little bit beyond us. Always mysterious. One step ahead.
But you do have, I know this from Ambika Prabhu, that you both have this habit of reading together, right? And how long have you been doing that? And I know that when I was asking her questions, she was always referring to your meetings and how you read this and how you read that.
Oh, yeah.
Wonderful.
Yes. She got that idea from some other friends of hers who were doing it. So she picked me up because we're kind of similar. She joined just after me and we're the same age. And so, I think I've just, I think it's probably over 2 years now that we've been doing it. And it's kind of very centering. Every day it's kind of like a center, like a stabilizing kind of center of the day and we read one verse from where we started on the third canto because I said, oh, let's not start on the first canto because we'll never get through it. So she said, oh, let's try the third canto. But the third canto is really, really long and we're still on the third canto.
It's long. Yeah, that's very wonderful. But do you share your realizations with other devotees? Do you encourage them also to do this group reading as you do? And if you do, do they share their experiences?
Yes, well, actually, Ambika was telling me that one devotee was asking her about it when she was in the deity room. Well, not in the deity room, but in the paraphernalia room. They got to talking about it, and that devotee's going to find someone also to do it with, so it could be quite catching on. And I think that they're also having some nice readings during Kartik, extra readings in the temple, for those who want to come, doing things like that. So sometimes, unless you're in a certain environment, it's sort of difficult just to sort of lurch into your realizations about something. And Bika and I talk about it because we talk about it every day. Mm-hmm. But you find that if other people aren't on the same wavelength, they can kind of think that you're weird or something. You know what I mean? So it's sometimes we go to lunch, and Bika and I and a couple of other friends go to lunch, and then we can talk about it because it's specifically for that purpose, to keep the conversation spiritual and not just, what did you do yesterday and, what did the temple president do and, blah, blah, all this kind of Gramya Katha. Yeah. So, and what was interesting was my son and I were sitting, we were out, it was at the end of a festival, and there was these other, a few Prabhupada disciples and a couple of other devotees sitting at the table. We're having prasadam, and they started everyone started to just talk Krishna Katha and just discuss some of Prabhupada's, some of Lord Chaitanya's disciples. And I thought, wow, this is it, you know, Tusyanti Charamanticha. You know, the disciples are, or the devotees discuss about Krishna and derive great pleasure and satisfaction from doing it. And I thought, wow, and even my son, who, you know, he's not initiated yet, but he's kind of an intelligent person. And he was like, you know, adding comments as well, that this, you know, remember this one and remember this devotee and he did this and he did that, you know, about Lord Chaitanya's pastimes and this and that. I thought, wow, you know, this is like real life. This is our real life where we're just relishing that, talking about the Lord and his pastimes. And where have we learned it all from? Reading Prabhupada's books in the Chaitanya Charitamrita and, you know, other associated books. So I think Ambika, she's a little bit more outgoing than I am, but she sometimes, you know, she'll purposely try to turn the conversation away from Grammy Guitar to, you know, what do you think about that, Prabhu? Have you had any realizations? That kind of thing. She's a bit more cheeky than I am. I'm a bit restrained. She'll just come out and say things. Yeah. Anyway, but it's like after we sort of, you know, I noticed that if you read the Bhagavatam in the morning, then when you're going out, and then it's kind of on your consciousness, whatever you're, not necessarily if you just read something, because often it goes in one ear and out the other, but if you're actually having to write notes about it and talk about it to another person, then you're sort of forced to really look at that verse and really think about that verse. What did Prabhupada mean? You know, what are all the Sanskrit words meaning? Do they match what Prabhupada translated? Sometimes Prabhupada adds things, sometimes he leaves things out. Why did he do that? You know, what's that mean? When you have to actually confront your own feelings about it, and sometimes you might not like that verse, sometimes you really like the verse, sometimes you think, you know, like sometimes we're thinking some of those hells are a bit mean. You know, think, why did Krishna make it so hard? All these kind of interesting introspections come up, and you find that you're thinking about these things as you're going along, because you've had to sort of force yourself to go deep into thinking about those verses. Whereas if you just read it and, you know, like you're in class and you hear things, you may not necessarily think about it too much. You just sort of listen, and then you go off to Prasadam kind of, and then, you know, go off to wherever you're going. But actually having to study specifically one verse, for example, then you sort of forced to spend an hour on that verse basically, and then you can really think about it. And you become very kind of connected with Prabhupada, because Prabhupada had to look at that verse himself. He had to translate it, and then he had to write the purport. So he had to think about that verse and how, you know, what he would say about that verse. So we also having to think about that too. So it kind of puts you in connection with Prabhupada writing those books, because you can see that it was a mammoth task, you know, absolute mammoth task to do purports and translate all of that, and, you know, it's unbelievable how he did it all, you know, day after day after day, right till he left. He was doing that, you know, translating the books.
Yeah.
You know, all for the, so, you know, if we honor Prabhupada, then we honor his books also and read them. You know?
I think
Yeah.
Ambika and you are a very nice example of just what you said, like, and I also wanted to like put this example up front in this interview, because as you said, like, if you just hear and listen to the lectures, I mean, it's very nice to read, but if you want to go deeper, then it's very nice to have a person with whom you can share. And I mentioned this a lot when I speak to the devotees on these interviews. I really like the statement of Madhvananda Prabhu when he said that through Krishna Katha, the community is built, because actually that's how you form spiritual friendships and spiritual relationships with other devotees, like through talking about what is written in the Prabhupada's books. All of the things. So thank you for sharing this. And yes, please.
No, I'm just thinking that even my son, who, we often have talks about the philosophy. And often other people, other devotees I know, we don't talk about the philosophy because she's just, other people just, they're not that way inclined. But my son often comes up and says, Mom, guess what I read? Did you know this? And what did this mean? And we actually have talks about it and, just thinking about what that means and how it sort of fits into everyday life and this kind of thing. So it's kind of interesting, really, that I can have those talks with my son where maybe I can't always say those things to other devotee friends. So, one has to find the people that one can have these talks with. Like with Ambika, we can talk about our realizations in japa, like in our meditation, where we trying to meditate on Krishna and trying to, have that relationship with Krishna in our meditations. Whereas a lot of people you can't discuss that with because they think that you're a sahaja or you're some sort of weirdo or, you're just making it up or, you know what I mean, or a bit presumptuous, I suppose. Something like that. So I think one has to choose how one speaks to different people, and you have to have certain friends who you can actually reveal your mind to, whereas others, you have a different relationship with. So it's good to have people that you can have, deep conversations with. There's another friend of ours, who we can also talk like that with. Things sort of more your relation, how your relationship with Krishna is developing, on a personal level. So these things are very, very personal, very, a little bit scary for some people, I guess. But I'm very, very pro, not neglecting that relationship with Krishna just because you feel like you're not pure enough. He's your best friend, and just be cheeky and just, like there's one Vidya keeps that I don't know if you know Vidya. Do you know Vidya from Vrindavan? No. Anyway, she sends me little she puts it on WhatsApp, and there's one devotee from the scriptures. He's quite cheeky, and he says, Lord, even though I don't deserve, I'm fallen, I don't deserve to be in Vrindavan, I'm going there anyway. And I'm going to stay in Vrindavan, even if I'm not pure, I'm going to stay there, and you have to look after me,
That's
because I noticed that one time when I got, I had to get quite heavy with Lord Nityananda once because I needed something to happen and no one was helping me. And I just, I said in no uncertain terms, you have to help me. You have to physically do it. I don't want it, you have to do something about this. And I'm demanding it right now. It's got quite a, like as you would with a friend or something, and he, 2 weeks later, the whole thing got fixed up, and it was very an unusual situation. And I had, my doctor, there was a doctor involved, and she did something really strange that she normally would never expect a doctor to do. And I thought, this is Lord Nityananda, but it was just an interesting scenario. So I thought, you can't just, we're devotees of Krishna, so we have to, we have to be devotees of Krishna, not, like we're always going to be neophytes. We're always going to be, too fallen to have a relationship with Krishna, because Krishna's there waiting. He's kind of waiting there for you. It's like, how long is she going to take before she turns around and, says something to me?
Yeah. That reminds me of that Brihad Bhagavatamrita story where Krishna was telling that to explaining it to Gopakumar, you had me dancing like a fool for lifetimes. I was just waiting that you turn around, and you didn't. So I had to come as a spiritual master to give you.
Yeah. That's nice story. Yeah.
I just wanted to also to, if you can say something, because about this topic, and that is that, for instance, today, this whole project of Books Are the Basis, and every September they have a week of trying to inspire devotees to read books. So this whole campaign is made because I guess there is a lack in reading the books, but there is never a lack in kirtan. So everyone loves kirtan. So the japa and the reading are the most difficult. So maybe you can say something like, what is the connection between kirtan and Prabhupada's books?
The connection between kirtan and Prabhupada.
Yeah, because I'm sure you will give a great answer to that, because they like music and so on, but we still need something else. So how would you connect it like that? People who are only for kirtan, so they can be inspired to read.
Yeah. Well, one has to follow the process with intelligence. It's intelligence is required. So in order to get intelligence, you have to read the books, because one has to know why one is chanting, and one has to know the meaning of the kirtan, and you get this through the books. So kirtan's very nice, and that's one level, but they sort of go both together. It's like you read the books, then you relish kirtan more. But in order to understand kirtan and what's happening and how the benefit of the kirtan, then you read the books, and then you can really relish. Then during the kirtan, then you can actually meditate on the Lord and get deeper into the kirtan. Because if you just think it's a nice song, or it just sounds nice. One time we had Madhava Kirtan, and I said to one devotee as I came out, I said, "Wow, that really invokes that mood of separation." And she said, "Oh, I don't feel that. It just sounds like a nice, it just makes me feel good, And I thought, wow, I thought everyone would feel that separation, from a Madhava Kirtan, because that's kind of the mood that he invokes. But some people see it differently, So I was thinking that we have to develop that mood of separation, and the kirtan one way to do that. But if you don't know, you have to find the different levels of of how you're progressing through the how the bhakti lata bij is growing, and all the different levels that you're reaching. Then you need to read the books to kind of understand what you might be feeling, and how this is impacting on your kirtan, and how you can go deeper into the kirtan and have these wonderful experiences with Krishna. Because it's not just you go to kirtan because you like, it sounds good and, the vibes are good. But the idea is to, connect with Krishna through that kirtan, and actually, cry for Krishna in that kirtan. So, if you're not crying, then you need to read the books more.
Yeah. That's very nice how you said it, and thank you very much. And also what it is for you, because that's one of the questions that we ask our guests, it is important for the devotee, as we understood, that he sees the world through the eyes of the scriptures. And how it is that for you, in your experiences? How do you see that?
Well, especially after learning slokas from the Bhagavad Gita, oftentimes you'll think of something, and then this little couple of Sanskrit words will come up. This is that verse, or this is it. And so, especially, being older devotees, we had kind of devotee jargon, and all the different ways of speaking that devotees speak. And so, these things naturally kind of naturally come out in every day. Sometimes when I, if I bang my head on the cupboard, I kind of, I have to think what's going on here. rather than just get angry at the cupboard. Just different things like that. I mean, generally we're devotees, so we kind of know who we are and what we're doing. But if you if you have more scripture behind you and more kind of books, if you've read more books, then you have more of a sense of clarity, I guess, and more depth to your understanding of things. But I don't know how much Krishna in the heart reveals. I mean, even if you read and read and read, then Krishna may reveal it.
Yeah. I mean, that's also my realization that when you read, you get.
That's up to the Lord by his mercy and the mercy of Guru, whether we understand things, even if we read them.
Yeah. Thank you very much. And we also have this statement that Srila Prabhupada lives forever in his books. So how do you see? What is your experience of? Do you have some realizations of that statement?
Yes. Well, when one's reading the books, and just it's, as I was saying before, when you look at the way Prabhupada translated it, and then you get a sense of the way Prabhupada speaks in that very gentlemanly tone, and how Prabhupada was very gentlemanly and very clever. And I noticed, reading these purports, that they're very clever. Everything, Prabhupada was good at one-liners, and he could kind of nail the point. Just he wasn't. He was what's the word? Besides being an erudite scholar, he was good. He had the gift of the gab, kind of. He could defeat. He was good at arguing, and he could think really quickly, and he could, put things very poignantly into sentences. I saw this a lot with reporters, and when people were challenging Prabhupada, he never lost the argument. He could always win the argument.
That's true.
So I see this in the books, that Prabhupada was also quite cheeky in the books sometimes, and he would get on the Indians' case, very subtly, like, about the Mayavad, and, the Mayavad sort of stuff that the Indians were quite interested in. And he would often, in the purports, they weren't so relative to the Westerners, because the Westerners really didn't know enough to be Mayavadis. But you can see that Prabhupada was very, it'd get kind of really heavy on the Indians through the purports. So you kind of, Prabhupada's character would come through at different times, regarding what sort of point. And I noticed that he would talk a lot about, in the third canto, at this one section, he was talking a lot about the impersonalism, and you could tell it was directed towards the Indian, the Indians, because they were very much being swayed by all these bogey yogis who had all this kind of nebulous philosophy of, we're all the light, and we're all one, and all this oneness, and this carrying on. It's kind of easy to say that, but so Prabhupada was often quite heavy with with the Indians like that. In Indonesia one time, Prabhupada was just surrounded by Indians, and he was reading that verse, "Men of small intelligence worship the demigods, and their fruits are limited and temporary." And Prabhupada turned to his secretary and said, what was that? Men of intelligence worship the demigods? and the secretary said, no, Prabhupada, men of small intelligence worship. And Prabhupada said, what was that? Men of what intelligence? The secretary said, no, Prabhupada, men of small intelligence. And Prabhupada said, oh, men of small intelligence. Oh, I thought Prabhupada was very clever. Whatever he did, he could outsmart his audience. And I always respected that. And he does it in the books too.
Yeah. So we can see his character in the books. And
yes. Especially if you knew Prabhupada a little bit, then you can see, his character in the books. But of course, all the devotees can know Prabhupada now because there's so many tapes and so many, videos of Prabhupada. But, it was very definitely special to have his personal association. Like Ambika was saying this morning, how rare it is to actually meet a devotee amongst, just a handful of people actually became Prabhupada's disciples, considering the world population at the time. And she's just thinking, how did we end up, in that group? We're just so fortunate that we got, scooped up by Prabhupada, to help him. I, of course, like to think, she's more humble than me, but I like to think that somehow we took birth in these countries, in these Western countries, because there was a plan to help Prabhupada right from the beginning. Somehow we planted.
Yeah. Thank you. And I would like to ask you, my last question would be, now that your message for the future generations regarding reading Prabhupada's books and their connection with Srila Prabhupada, what would you advise them? What would be your message for them?
Well, sometimes people are very studious and they like books, and other people, they find it really a struggle to read books. There's one South American devotee, and she said she has so much trouble reading because it's not her native language, and but she's sort of in Australia and this and that. So I thought that's interesting because not everyone has the same capacity for reading. So that makes it probably more challenging for those who aren't naturally inclined. Like there's all these super devotees who are so scholarly and so studious, the PhD devotees, they can read something, understand it. A lot of devotees have, trouble to kind of read, and, they're more like, they might be more cooks, they might be more that kind of personality. But still, it's just a matter of making connection with the books, and you don't have to read copious amounts. But if you just read a little bit with respect and love, and always remember that Brahmin, that devotee, I don't know if he was a Brahmin or he was the one who couldn't read or write, and he would open the Bhagavad Gita and just cry, and all the words got washed away because he was just remembering Krishna through that Bhagavad Gita, because he'd heard about it, but he couldn't even read. So the thing is that the books are very, they're Prabhupada's heart. They're like associating with Prabhupada when, you don't have his personal presence. So it's kind of important to establish the relationship with Srila Prabhupada, even if you're not his disciple, because these books are his books, and they are for the next, for the golden age, for the next 10,000 years, Prabhupada would say that these are the books. So to make these connections with these books is very important, because you're making a connection with the parampara, and it's very important to connect with the parampara because that's our family. So these are like the family history. So even if you can't read a lot, like I say, you can just read a little bit, and even that little bit makes, you have that connection, because it's all about becoming, the idea of Krishna consciousness is to make Krishna the center, and at the time of death, Krishna so you go to Krishna. So it's important to books, Krishna's pastimes, become very familiar with it so that it becomes part of you. And like I often say to people, when they first join, sometimes people say, what's the most important point? I said, just keep doing it. You just got to keep doing it. Don't give up, because, after 20, 30, 40 years, you'll be glad you stuck it out and you just kept doing it. So the same thing with the books. I mean, sometimes I read more and sometimes I read less. It depends on the situation, what's going on. I'm very I'm very sensitive to my environment. So if I don't have much sun in the house, then I can't read properly because I need sun. I know that sounds strange, but I'm a person that needs lots of light. Otherwise, I have to get out of the house. So I was reading a lot in the back, and then suddenly they decided to build a building in the back of behind my place. So it became dark. The room where I used to read and study got dark. Then I got totally bewildered because I couldn't, so then I had to move everything to another room and kind of set it all up again. And by Krishna's grace, a little bit of sun started coming again. But, I mean, even if one is a little bit, weird like me, a little bit fussy, and, you can just do something, just read a little bit of something. And even though you might not like, some of the books might be too heady. Like I try to read the Brahma Samhita, the Bhakti Siddhanta purports. They're just like so heady. It's really hard to understand them. You have to think about every word or get the dictionary out for every sentence. You know what I mean? And then, so you have to find the books that you like and focus on those, I think, rather than trying to force yourself to do this and force yourself to do that. You'll find some books you like more and other books, you'll find difficult. So it's kind of a very subjective thing, because Krishna likes all different types of people, all different servants. In the spiritual world, he has so many different servants. They're all different. They all have different moods. And, everyone's not the same. So I wouldn't be too concerned if you don't feel like you're the same as the next devotee, that you have different interests. You like, other people like the philosophy more, that kind of thing. But yeah, everyone has different tastes and different flavors, and because they all have different offerings for Krishna, all different services to offer Krishna, and different moods, different ways of relating to Krishna, and Krishna loves it all. He likes variety. He can't wait for your service.
Yeah.
He can't wait for your individuality to come through.
That's very nice that you said all those things, and I thank you for sharing your wisdom and knowledge. And I just wanted to tell you that sometimes when you were speaking, because of the connection, the picture I heard you, but maybe the picture would become still, but then it would move again. Picture of you. So, but that's just that because of the connection.
Oh, that's all right. That's all right. Perfect. I'm not very good at this technology sort of thing.
Me neither. I just follow the instructions like that.
Yeah. I'm going to have to call my son. Kirti, come here. You need to help me.
Yeah. But I really thank you for being our guest. I'm very honored that I had the opportunity to speak with you and get to know you a little bit, which I don't think in person I would get an opportunity, since I live in Switzerland and you're in Australia. So it's really very far away. But who knows? Maybe we'll meet someday. So thank you very much for your time. For me, it was a lovely interview, and I really loved so many things that you said. It was very inspiring, and I wish you all the best, and to also relish more Srila Prabhupada's books, books of the Acharyas as well, with your friend Ambika Prabhu. I think you two are very nice.
Yes.
A very nice pair of change. Yeah.
She's more pure than I am, though.
Yeah, that's what she said for you. But that's not.
know she's wrong. I know that she's more pure. Anyway.
Prabhu very much. So
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama, Rama